And we are live on the Frugal Crafters YouTube channel. A little bit better in practice, I think, this week. What do you think, Sarah?
Well, you know, it's starting out a little smoother.
Yeah, hopefully there will be no sound issues or anything else. I could hear Chewy panting behind us, so hopefully if you hear any heavy breathing, it's the dog.
Yeah, it's not us getting super weird or anything.
We are going to paint this loose bird in watercolor today. We're also going to do some sketching with some watercolor pencils. I have the exact colors and brands that I'm using linked in the video description if you need more information. But you can seriously follow along at home with what you have. Get the closest color you have. You know, don't worry about it. This is a fun project, and I want you guys to have fun doing it. And I'm actually, this little palette I'm using, I'm just going to show you really quick. It is the portable painter. A few people have asked me about that because I took it on vacation with me, so you can kind of see how that works. You got the legs on it are actually water buckets, so it's kind of cool because you can have your dirty water and clean water. And I find as long as I have 2 buckets, it doesn't matter if they're tiny, it keeps my mixes fresh because I always wash my brush in the dirty bucket, and that gets most of the gunk off of it before I get fresh water for my new mix. So that's why we use 2 buckets when we're watercoloring. I also wanted to let you know that in celebration of my birthday this week, my watercolor course is on sale for $41, regular $79. So if you missed the introductory special but you wanted to grab it, it's a great time to do it, and it's on sale through Monday. And links to that is also in the video description. So I'm going to set this aside and put out a nice fresh piece of 100% cotton paper. This is cheap paper that I did this practice on. This is just Aquafine by Daler and Rowney. So you do not have to have crazy expensive paper for this. This is the cheap stuff. And I am going to use the Langton Prestige, which is their professional grade for the demo today. But, you know, just use what you have. Have fun. No pressure today. If you have questions as we're going along, you can type the word question in all caps in the video description. I mean, in the comment section. What do you call that thing? The chat box?
The chat box.
And Sarah will relay the questions to me, or the moderators will help you out because we have some great moderators today. And we are going to begin by grabbing our watercolor pencils. The reason I decided to use Inktense is because once you add water to these pencils, they become permanent. They become kind of like a permanent ink on your paper. So then you can go splashing watercolor all around, and it's not going to disturb what you put down with the Inktense. That said, you can use watercolor pencils for this. That's why I chose to use these. And also they're on sale on Amazon this week. So I thought, oh, that's another good reason to use that brand. That way, if anyone had been wondering about it, they can see it in action before they buy. I'm going to start with yellow. This is cadmium yellow. It's a nice kind of warm yellow. And I'm going to get the bird's body in here, kind of in the middle of the paper. And I'm going to make it kind of big here. So this is going to be like I'm drawing darker than you really would want to, kind of the shoulder wing area, coming down the belly, between the legs, coming up the kind of back area, and underneath the wing there. And I'm just going to make a curved line under where the head's going to be. Since I'm going in with color now, I do not want to get the yellow where the blue is going to be, or I'm going to end up with a green-headed bird. So I'm going to get the head sketched in here, get this top of the wing there, get the head coming around. You put the little beak on while I'm at it. And I want to get this little bit of wing over here as well. Also get the tail coming out from the back here. The tail will look a little awkward until we fuzz it, make it a little fuzzier with our paint. And the legs, we've got one leg kind of coming off straight. And we've got this one coming off at quite an angle. So you just want to get this almost like a stick bird type image down, and then I want to get the eye in while I'm at it. I'm going to do that with the blue, and I'm also just going to kind of make a little indication as to where the color is. Bluebird's head here, just so I can kind of preserve some areas that I want to be light. Okay, now I'm going to go in with a browner color. This is oak. It's 1730 Inktense color. You can use any sort of brown. Get the branch that our bird is standing on. And then I could put in another branch up here. The photographer that the photo reference that I'm using, I believe it's a composition. I think she might have put a couple photos together to make this. But anyway, her name is Jill Wellington, and I discovered her on the Pixabay website, and I started scrolling through her album, and my goodness, she is so talented. Her work is just infused with light and color. It's just gorgeous. I highly recommend taking a few minutes to scroll through her gallery and see what she has to offer. She has so many images for free on Pixabay for anybody to use. It's really worth a look. And she actually, it said on her bio that she is a portrait artist, photographer. So I could use her services. I mean, if she was local to me, I would hire her in a heartbeat. I don't even know her. She doesn't even know I'm talking about her. She's going to be like, who is this crazy woman? But now we're going to grab some red. We're going to do just a few indications of some little buds here. Kind of like an apple blossom or cherry blossom. How's the chat going, Sarah?
Good. The image is staying a little blurry. This is what it's looking like.
That's strange.
Yeah.
If you guys in the chat could let us know if it's looking blurry on your end.
It is.
It is.
People...
Could you go find my children and make sure they're not on the computer? Thank you. It's school. It's summer vacation, so I think that there may be some kids streaming something. So we're just going to get I'll sketch with you. This doesn't need to be super crisp. I think you'll be able to see it all right. And Sarah can get to the bottom of the sketchy looking video. All right, and now I'm going to throw in a few little leaves. I'm using the color Spring Green. 1550 is the color number. And you just want your leaves to maybe be a little bit bigger than your buds. They're kind of like an almond shape. You know, you don't have to be just trying to, I space those out pretty evenly. That's not really what you want to do. You want to kind of, make them random. You don't want it to look like it was the leaves were put there on purpose. They should look a lot more random, less deliberate. All right. And I think that's pretty much all we need for a sketch to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a round brush. So I'm going to scooch this over just so you can see my palette a little bit. So I'm going to wet my brush. Now this palette did come with a little brush, but with a painting this big, this brush is not going to be that useful. It's great if you're doing a small sketch on location and you have a small watercolor pad to work from. But when you're working with a big piece of paper, do yourself a favor and use a bigger brush because it's just going to give you a better result. Were there kids online?
Nope. All the internets are off.
Huh. Well,
it's cleared up.
Oh,
so.
Good. So what I'm doing here is just because this is Inktense, I'm going in and I am just...
People forget we live in Maine. We do not have 4G.
Oh my word, yeah.
We're lucky we get 3G
and we pay the price for
spots, so sometimes it's just not great. Sometimes it's gotta catch up.
Right. So I'm just doing on the bird, I am just liquefying some of the pigment just so it doesn't blur out. Just want to preserve my sketch a little bit. We'll be doing more with watercolor in a bit, but I just want to kind of lock that down. Inktense are a really fun pencil. They're probably the most vibrant watercolor pencil that I've used. The Albright Drawers are pretty vibrant as well. They're pretty close. They're quite a bit more expensive. But I do like these. They're a lot of fun. Doesn't take very much pigment to get a lot of impact either. Okay, so now that I have those locked down, I am going to actually add some kind of big splashy marks on my background. I want to have kind of a rough border, because sometimes when I have a piece of paper like this that I've torn down, I really like the rough look, and a lot of times if I go to display it, what I'll do is I will mount it on mat board, and I will leave the raw edge, that white raw edge, and I think that kind of adds to the beauty of it. So I'm not wetting the entire thing, but I am kind of Gonna splash down some color, splash down some water, and then I'm gonna be adding color splashes on top of it. So we're going to end up with different shapes of splashy color. And that's a great way to loosen up because you can't really force where your color is going to go. It's kind of a little bit of surprise. And I find that randomness is better than what we could plan. So I'm first going to start off by splashing down a little bit of, I think I'm going to mix a little bit of burnt umber with phthalo blue. Because I know I'm using phthalo blue rather than ultramarine because I know I'm using phthalo blue on the bird as well. So that will just help me kind of keep those colors kind of matching. Add a little more water to that. That's pretty dark. I can tip my paper and let it roll. I can go in and define an edge if I want to and let it kind of roll. Doing a lot of this up in the sky area. And I didn't tape down my paper or anything. Because I worked right in a sketchbook with cheaper paper before and it was fine. So I know that this would be fine here as well. That will be there. And I apologize for any inconvenience. So sap green or olive green, whichever you have, we're going to flick some of that on there. If I feel like time slows down whenever we're having technical difficulties, I'm surprised my paper's still wet because it feels like it's been like 3 hours that we've been struggling with the internet. And I think a little bit more sap green, actually. You can, if you have like a big puddle, you can touch the green in there and see what it does. I think it looks a little bit better when we spatter it, though. If you do get a big clump that you don't like, you can spread it around. Like if you got a clump on dry paper and you didn't like the look of that. And if you have any hard edges that you don't like, you can go in with a wet brush and just soften them. If you don't have a big round one like this, you can go ahead and use a big flat brush. That'll be just fine. I am going to go ahead and grab some of the quinacridone rose and flick that in as well. That's a color we're going to do the buds. And this will kind of give the look of like, you know, different leaves and buds in the trees that are a little bit further away. So we'll give the bird the appearance of being nestled into the tree.
R2 Pavola, do you think the Albrecht Dürer pencils are as good as Inktense or better?
I think they're a little bit better. They're supposedly more light fast. They are also more expensive, but yeah, I think they're better. And as far as like Faber-Castell products, I really like their Albrecht Dürer and their Polychromos, but a lot of the other watercolor pencils I'm not impressed with. So I think if you're going with the Albrecht Dürer, you're safe though. They're a good pencil. I'm just going in any place I see like too much white or too many hard edges, I'm going in and just kind of smudging whatever colors are close in there. I will be stopping to dry the background fairly soon. So if you have questions, I'll be able to answer a bunch of them at that time. I don't like to have too much of like a white halo around my bird. So that's why I'm going in and just kind of softening some areas. Since this is cotton paper, I do have a little bit more luxury of not working quite as quickly because the paper does not dry out as fast as a cellulose paper. So if you're struggling painting along and your paper's drying on you and you're getting backwashes, first of all, backwashes will look pretty with this picture, but that's probably why when you use a cotton paper, it does tend to absorb slower and give you a little more working time. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons you might want to upgrade sometime if you're using the wood pulp paper. I really like, and it's funny when you look at a cotton paper, and I'm going to show you the example I just did, because just the paper, the paint on the paper does look prettier on cotton paper. So without having to do anything with skill, just the paper and the paint look prettier together. You have to work a little bit more when you're using like a wood pulp paper, but you certainly can use whatever you want, but you do get more like blooms and blossoms. I actually think that looks kind of cool in there, but you know, the type of paper and paint you choose does, you know, have an impact. I'm going to dry this. If you have any questions, go ahead and put the word question in all caps and type it in the chat, and Sarah will relay those questions to me.
Ian Jackson, is the Quinn Rose paint Quinn Rose permanent?
It's a PV19. It should be a permanent color. It is the Daniel Smith Quinn Rose from the Essential set. I believe that's a PV19.
April, I just ordered the Bianco watercolor set of 30 when they went on sale on Amazon. Have you tried them, and what do you think?
I have not. I've heard that they're used quite frequently in schools in Europe. I think they're kind of like a cross between a tempera and watercolor cake. I believe they're a little bit more opaque than a traditional watercolor, but I personally have not used them.
Aldana A. Can I use paintings made following your tutorials for my website for design purposes?
I guess I don't know what you mean. You guys can paint after anything I show you. I don't mind at all. The only restrictions I have is just not submitting those paintings to magazines, because I submit tutorials to magazines. And also, if I've used a reference photo from Graphic Stock, you would need to be a Graphic Stock member in order to use those paintings you've done from their photo references, just because I can't grant rights beyond what I do. You know, I can only grant rights that far. So I would just check out the reference photos, you know, make sure it's not a Graphic Stock one or any other paid subscription. Otherwise, you'd have to subscribe to that service as well in order to use that in a commercial purpose. We are almost dry.
Magical Bivana, what do you think of Caran d'Ache?
Oh, I love Caran d'Ache. They make exquisite products. I really like their watercolor crayons. That's my favorite Caran d'Ache product. I'm not crazy about their water brushes. I liked them at first, but they seem to stop working after a while. I've used their Supercolor watercolor pencils, and those are nice. I have not used their museum or their wax colored pencils, but their Supercolors are nice, and those are kind of like the lower grade ones. Great products. I highly recommend them. Okay, so now we're going to work. I think we'll work on the bird a little bit, because we'll have to do that in some layers. So we'll kind of jump around a little bit, so we don't have to stop and spend a lot of time. Drying things. Hopefully that'll be the last time we have to stop and dry. And I want to start with the yellow body, and I am going to I'm going to clean off this little spot on my palette here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start off by grabbing some Hansa Yellow Light. You could also use lemon yellow. It's your cool yellow. And I'm going to apply some of that towards the top of the body, kind of where the light would be hitting the bird. I could flick a little bit into the background just so I get those little kind of feathery hairs. And I'm using a number 12 round. You can use whatever you're comfortable with. It could be as small as a 6 if that's what you would prefer to use. Not all brushes come to such a nice point, so use what's going to get the job done. But I would try to use something big enough that it will hold some paint, because if you get a brush that's too small, it's not going to hold too much paint for you, and you're going to have to keep re-dipping. Now I'm going to grab some of the gamboge. You could also use Cad Yellow Deep. You could use Indian Yellow, any sort of yellow that looks a little bit more like orange. It's your warmer yellow. And that's going to go underneath where we've put the brighter yellow, the more lemony color, and they can mix together, and that's fine. In fact, I think it looks nice when you see the colors start to kind of flow together.
Barusiva, what is the breadth and length of the table you work on?
The one upstairs, gosh, I would say this is maybe 2 feet by 30 inches, I would say. What would you say, Sarah?
I was going to say roughly 2 feet by 3 feet. It's not huge.
No, this is a small drafting table. I will spread to whatever size I have.
Yeah, it's like 3.5. Oh.
You think? I don't think that's a full yard wide. Maybe.
I think it's just a yard.
Maybe two
hair
by
under.
3. Yeah, it's not very big.
Ivy May, what are some challenges that watercolors bring versus oil painting, and which do you prefer?
I like them both. I probably prefer watercolor a little bit more. Watercolor is quick drying, so that's probably the biggest challenge. And the fact that it's transparent is a big challenge. I just grabbed a little yellow ochre, by the way. That's probably the biggest challenge because you can't just paint over a mistake that you make. So a lot of times you either have to kind of charge in and live with what you do, or you've got to lift up or use masking fluid and plan a little bit more than with oils. But I think they both have their own positives and negatives, and I like them both. I added a little burnt umber into my yellow ochre, and I'm just kind of throwing that in anywhere I want to darken up the feathers a bit. My lines will retain a little bit, so I'm going into some damp paint. My brush isn't so wet that I'm creating blooms. It will retain very soft lines when I go in and kind of flick it in here, which does help me get the illusion of feathers. But this is a loose painting. I don't want to have too much detail. I just kind of want to get a little bit of feeling of fluffiness. When you're getting to the edge, just very gently, and your brush should be up at a 90-degree angle. I apologize if it looks like I'm going to poke you in the eye with my brush, but your brush should be at a 90-degree angle. You're just kind of flicking it, just dragging out a little bit of paint with just the tippy top of that brush touching your paper. And that's how you get that nice, the nice fluffy feeling. And now I think I want a little bit lighter in the center. Get a few more little fluffs up here. Then I'm going to do a little bit lighter in the center just by simply adding some water to my brush.
MT Sweet, concerning the toxicity of the paint, how do you dispose of rinse water? It does not feel right to pour cadmium down the drain. It's
such a small amount that with watercolor, what you have left over is such a small amount. As long as you clean your palette and you wipe it off and throw that in the trash, I don't think anything in your rinse water is going to be an issue. If you're worried, you could let the paint settle out, pour off the clear water, wipe out your bucket, and then rinse it out if you want to lessen the chance of that contaminating anything. But it's such a small amount that I think it would be naturally occurring in the ground anyway. So I'm going to take some water into that kind of brown mix that I was using. I don't think you can see both sides of my palette. Maybe if I scooch this over a little bit more. I want to mix a little bit of that with just a smidgen of the phthalo blue, just to kind of gray it a little bit, maybe add a little bit of that rose color to it. Basically, I want to balance it so I get kind of like a gray. And that is what I'm going to use just kind of on the underbelly. And I'm just going to, again, keep my strokes kind of feathery, just on the tip of the brush, wicking it in towards the center, because the feathers will kind of go around the body. So we want that. We want to make sure we're getting that contour when we add our paint in.
Baldwin Leatherworks, how well does this new palette colors life in comparison to the other watercolor brands that you have used?
Well, the palette doesn't come with any colors in it. These are all colors that I've put in. When I went on vacation, I had different colors in there because I didn't have time to pour new paint. I put Daniel Smith, Winsor Newton, Sennelier, I think a couple of core colors and a Schmincke color. So, I mean, I'm using all different kinds of colors. Honestly, once you get into the artist range, I don't think there's a heck of a lot of difference between any artist brand. Once you get into the professional brands, they're all pretty good. So I really wouldn't worry about it too much. As long as you stick with a brand that you know is reputable. Now I'm going to grab some phthalo blue. I'm going to go here on this tail. I'm going to start off with a pretty strong stripe of color here. And then I'm just going to kind of let it fade out a little bit. I'm going to grab some of that mixed color that I used on the belly and add that down here and just kind of let them mix together. can leave a little bit of a gap between the feathers on the body and the tail, just so it doesn't blend together.
As your muse, what do you feel is, if any, the difference, pros or cons of the Inktense blocks or pencils?
I think the pencils are much more versatile. I hardly ever use the blocks, and I've had the blocks were one of those things I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get those. Those are great. As soon as they came out, I had to get them, and I don't use them nearly as much as the pencils. I think that you get as much product in the pencils because the leads are really thick. Like I sharpen mine with a knife, and you can see how thick that lead is. And the pencils are more than twice as long as the blocks. So I really think you get as much material. So I guess it would just be like how you like to use them, would be the big thing. I tend to want to sketch with them, and I find the pencils just to be a little bit more versatile. And then you can sharpen them to a point if you want to work on something tiny, like maybe you like to do rubber stamping and you want to get into some smaller areas. You have that versatility as well. So they're a good product. You know what? I have to say, I don't feel like the product and the Inktense blocks are the same. I feel like they're kind of chalkier. Like when I've done a painting with just the blocks, and they don't feel as transparent to me. And I'm wondering they might just need some extra binder because they don't have the stick around them. So they need something to keep them safe. Now, I don't know this for sure, but this is how it seems using them and looking at artwork done with the pencils and done with the blocks. The ones with the blocks just feel chalkier, and they don't feel as vibrant as the pencils. So it's probably something to do with some binder that it needs in order to keep them from breaking and crumbling in your hands. But I definitely would advise, if you have to pick between the two, to go with the pencils, and really think hard about the blocks if you're really going to use them and why you think you need them, because they have not proven to be as useful to me as I thought they would be, and definitely not as useful as the pencils. If anybody else wants to chime in to or for, with an argument for them, please do. I don't want to dissuade anybody, but just in my experience, they have not been as useful as the pencils, and they break pretty easily too. You can add concentrated bits of color any place you need, and that just helps give you a little bit of interest.
Dusty Stockland, I've never used watercolor pencils before. What would be a good starter set?
Well, it really depends on what you want to spend and what your needs are. It's when you're buying like artist pencils, and usually they're a lot cheaper by the set than by the pencil. But if you buy like a set of 12 and you realize you really like them, and you go buy the set of 24, those 12 that were in the first set are going to be repeated in every other set. So every set you go bigger usually includes all the colors from the set previous, like the next smaller set. The only companies that don't do that are actually not artists, quote unquote companies. They're more craft companies, but I think it's kind of smart that they do it that way. But Prima has duplicates between their sets. So Spectrum Aqua is probably the only one that doesn't, or Spectrum Noir, that doesn't do duplicates between their sets. Honestly, probably the best thing to do would be to buy a few individual pencils from a few different brands and see what you like the best, and then invest in a set of the type you like the best. I would get different colors from different brands because they will all work together. So there's no point buying a red in every single brand and then seeing how that red compares. I would, get a variety, and then as you start to use them up, to prove that you're really going to use them, then go in and decide on a set to get, and then use that set, and try not to be, Monday morning quarterbacking your decision, because then you'll end up in a situation like me with every set known to man, thinking that the grass is greener every time you see something new that you have to have. I'm on this new minimalism kick. Can you tell?
Yes. It's good though. The Pinecone Crafter. Do you know a way to get rid of carbon paper marks?
Graphite paper should come off with an eraser. Carbon is a little tricky. If you have like one of those kneadable erasers, they feel kind of like clay, and you press it down onto the paper and peel it up, that can soften it. I don't think it will get rid of it completely, but it will certainly help. Now I want to make a nice rich dark. And I'm going to go with my two darkest colors that I've been using. I'm going to go with my burnt umber pretty thickly, and my my phthalo blue. And this is almost like the consistency of, oh gosh, maybe like honey. It's pretty thick. And I'm still using the same brush. If you feel like switching to a smaller brush, you can go right ahead and do that. But this one comes to a nice point, so so I feel pretty confident using this. When I need more control, I just hold the brush closer to the tip. Now, sometimes you'll get in here, especially working on a cotton paper, and you'll be like, my brush wants to bend and it won't drop the paint. So if you get in a situation like that, what I would recommend doing is just having an inexpensive set of synthetic brushes around. These are synthetic too, but these are meant to mimic real fur. These are just like synthetic Taklon. And the nice thing about them is that you can get a good detail with them. Now, they're not going to hold a lot of paint or water because they're synthetic, but you can get a lot of detail. You just have to reload your brush more often, but they're stiffer, so I can go in and it's almost like using a pen because it's not bending so much, and it's just letting you just deposit the paint where you want it. I can go in and kind of rim the eye with this darker color and get that detail, because being able to paint around a little sparkle in the eye is really nice. It's just the drawback is that you have to go in and you have to reload. But if you're just doing little feathery strokes like this, it's not that big of a deal. And this would be called a spotter usually because it's got small short bristles. And this is a 5/0 Royal Fusion. I think I picked that up at AC Moore in like a 20 pack for like $10 or something. It was very affordable. That was probably a sale price or with a coupon, but still no more than 20.
Moonram, say question/suggestion. Inktense blocks, when diluted, helps to maintain their translucent quality and does not make them chalky. Lisa from Lacquery Fine Art and Acorn Artworks of Australia use it that way.
Oh, good to know. I love Lisa. Lisa is she's a very nice internet friend of mine.
And someone else was saying that they actually put their brushes on the sticks instead of coloring with them, and find it works a little better too.
Oh, nice. Use it like a pan.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to justify.
Yeah, we have several people here who do like the blocks as well as the pencils, but they do like the blocks too.
That's a wonderful thing about art supplies nowadays. You can seriously find the perfect medium for you. You just want to be careful as you're doing, like eyes and beak, especially in a bird, can go, if you just get it a little bit off, especially if it's like a small beak or small eyes, it can get, it can throw off the whole picture pretty easily. So you just want to take your time on those.
Baru Siva is asking about a wooden palette you have for oil.
Yeah.
Is it solid wood or engineered wood?
I really don't think it would matter, but mine that came in with my French easels, I believe it's solid, but I don't think it would matter if it was solid or like a masonite panel. I don't think it would affect the working properties of it at all.
Carrie Cuddlepus, I got some Daniel Smith and I found them hard to layer because it seems to pick up the layer below and just pushes the paint to the edge, even using Squirrel. I'm assuming Squirrel brushes. Probably. Yeah. Any suggestions on how not to?
I'm betting it's probably your paper. Your paper might have a lot of sizing in it, and that could be the problem. Or maybe you're not letting it dry completely before you go in and glaze, because I have done some glazing with Daniel Smith and I haven't had any issues. Or it could be your undercoat is really thick. If your undercoat's really thick, that will also give you some issues. The nice thing about having a small brush like this is that you can go in without too much, without altering too much. So if you're a little nervous, you're not going to do as much damage to something because you're not going to be putting as much paint down. I also want to get in, there's like some darker feathers on the belly, and I want to go in and kind of get that in here too with this dark color right now, right off the bat. I like to get my darks in first, which is a little opposite from some watercolor painters. They like to work completely light to dark, but I find getting those darker values in right off the bat makes you braver throughout the painting, and then you don't have to fuss quite so much. And I feel like that needs a little bit more of the brown in it. Now I'm going to water that down and maybe add a smidgen of rose to it just to get that green hue out, and add a little bit kind of in this, because you wouldn't have white like that. So I'm going to go in and add some of that really light.
Dusty Stockland, did you go to art school or are you self-taught?
I did not go to art school. I did take art lessons through my childhood. So that
so disgusting big ant.
Yeah, there's lots of big ones around here, especially on the porch.
My house too. It's disgusting. Gross. Go out in nature where you belong.
A credit card scraper to do the little scratches and the feathers works really well. I'm going to bring that to the camera, so hopefully you can see that a little bit better. Okay, and then I think I'll just hold off on the legs for a bit until I get the branch and everything in. I'm going back to my number 12, and I'm going to go right in with my burnt umber. And I'm just going to sketch in my little branch. We sketched it already with a pencil, so it should be pretty easy to throw in there.
Golden.
With all the kids here, you should be able to find a playmate.
Take the side of the door.
Oh, now she's settled down. You want to just get the starts of the little branches that the buds are on, because the ends of them are going to be that same rose color that the buds are. So you don't need to get too much of that in there. You can grab a little yellow ochre too. I like to rinse off my brush so I get the colors kind of fresh on their own, and I can go and add some of that here and there and get a little bit of a interesting color mix on my branches.
People are saying the sound is crackly.
Oh no. Is this still crackly? Are they still saying that?
Yes.
Oh shoot. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna switch microphones. Okay, this microphone is the microphone on the camera, so it'll be about a 30-second delay. So hopefully people will say it's clearing up. Please let us know, guys, if it clears up.
People will let us know.
Please. This has been a weird broadcast. Well, if it's really bad, you can mute it and put it on speed or
Better.
Oh, good. Okay. You might need to speak up more because I think it's the microphone right here on the camera, so it's right next to me. Okay, I'm going to grab some of the rose, quinacridone rose. So the only downside to the portable painter, if you're working on a big painting like this, is that you don't have the mixing room that you would have in like a big palette. So, you know, it's definitely best for going out and about, painting out in nature. little buds down first, and it's just really a dab, almost like a Chinese sumi-e painting or Chinese brush painting or sumi-e painting, where you just do the suggestion. And I'm going to, I think I will grab a smaller brush. I'll grab a liner for this actually, to do the little stems that attach their little buds to the bigger branch. So you want some fairly watery paint. It should be kind of like skim milk. And you're just gonna flick little lines into the branches. Don't worry if you don't have a stem for every one. The brain will fill in the details. Then we're going to go grab some green, and we are going to paint a few leaves in there. Go back to the number 12 round for that, or whatever round you're comfortable with. It's not too small.
Oh, someone had asked earlier what kind of bird this was.
You know, I am not sure. Spring bird is what the thing said. Looks kind of like a, I don't know. We don't really have, we have blue jays, but we don't really have bluebirds around here, do we?
We have the eastern bluebird sometimes. They usually don't come up this far north, but this isn't a blue jay for sure. It's too cute.
Yeah. Blue jays are pretty aggressive and loud.
Ian Jackson says a blue tit.
Oh.
Is that in the titmouse family, I wonder?
I don't know. I thought titmouse was a mouse.
Nope. There's the tufted titmouse, which we have up here, which are little cute gray birds. They come to my bird feeders.
Oh. I can't identify all the ones that we have. We finally have got cardinals. We've never gotten cardinals before. This is the first year that we.
I got the National Geographic has like an Eastern name, like Eastern, or not just name, but Eastern birds, and so it has like pictures and descriptions, and I've been using that to identify some stuff.
Oh, nice.
There was a big bird out there yesterday. I was in the kitchen. I hear all this racket, all these robins are rah, rah, rah. Never heard them so noisy. And go out. I didn't see what the bird was. I only saw him about was some good sized bird was out there harassing the robins, and a bunch of them chased it off.
Oh, I had a lot of crows. I think that there must be like grubs or something, or Japanese beetles, something they're after.
I don't know what it was, but they yeah.
I'm flicking regular water here because I want some of that paint to move. I want to have a nice loose, watery background, and I feel like I have a lot of really soft, and then I've got a lot of really hard edges, and I don't have anything in between. So I'm hoping that by kind of adding some really big wet areas, I can flick on a little more paint and encourage a little bit more movement.
This is the Eurasian blue tit. Is what it is. Let's see. Kendall McCauley. I like to start each painting with a fresh palette, but I feel slightly guilty wiping away the leftover paint. Do I just deal with it or use it?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by leftover paint. Like what I have left in the mixing area here, I wipe that off. You're probably wasting more paint trying to integrate that into a new painting than you're gonna save. But if it would be like, I wouldn't clean out the middle, that's good paint, you know? So as long as I think if you let your paint dry like that in palettes or wells, and you just clean out the mixing area, that's a pretty nominal amount. And just think, if you're painting with oils or acrylics, I mean, you'd be wasting that. You waste so much, you know, when that dries, you can't get it back. So because you're doing watercolor, I think you're doing a more sustainable type of painting. So I would just wipe out the mixing area and start fresh. You know, there's no point in making yourself miserable to save like half a cent worth of paint. Gotta let that go, I think. All right, so now I'm just going to look around and see if there's any areas where the edges are too hard that I don't like. Like up here, that edge is really hard, so I'm just going to wet it up to the, kind of wet those edges and let that kind of flow. So this is just kind of, you know, you just go and you look at it and you see what, you know, you go by your own preference here. Did you have a question?
Nope, just clear my throat.
Oh.
And Kendall McCauley was talking about the mixing wells, so.
Oh, the mixing wells.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just let it, you know, if you let it dry before you use it, you can reserve most of that, save most of that paint. But if you don't want to, then just don't squeeze out so much. You'll have to stop mid-painting probably and get a little more out. But if you prefer to paint from the tube, then paint from the tube. Just don't put so much out. There's no wrong way. If you don't like red so much, don't use so much red. If you like yellow more, use more yellow. Do your painting however you want to do your painting. I want more yellow, actually. I like that yellow. And it's nice to kind of take one of your focal colors and add it here and there and get that kind of cross-pollination of colors going. Okay, I'm just going to dry this area here because I want to work on the feet, but I don't really have to bother drying the rest of it. The only thing you might want to dry, if you have a habit of laying your hand in your work, you might want to dry that, but other than that, I wouldn't worry about it. I feel like that red was kind of on its own a little bit too much there. I gotta add something around it. So when you're in a painting kind of like this, you're almost painting an abstract. You have to kind of look at it objectively as just like the shapes and the design, as opposed to, it doesn't look like a bird, it doesn't look like a tree. We're back up to 320, so that's good. Not everybody bailed on us during technical difficulties.
It happened. We were due. It's been a while since we've had technical difficulties, so we were due.
We didn't have any technical difficulties last time?
No.
No crackling mics or anything? Oh,
no.
Wow.
No. And then the week before that, we didn't have anything. And the week before that was fine. And the week before that, we didn't have a video. And then the week before that, I wasn't here.
The one I did by myself, I had a crackling mic at the end. Okay, I think that's dry enough. All right, so on the legs, we are going to mix up a little burnt umber and a little ultramarine blue. I'm sorry, phthalo blue. We haven't used ultramarine in this. I'm not going to use that brush. I'm going to use the smaller one. And iron consistency, like kind of like about whole milk or so. Not too watery, not too thick. I'm going to go straight down with this leg. And I'm going to go angled with this leg. Because at first on my practice one, I had them both kind of splayed out a little bit. It looked really comical. So I decided I need to straighten that leg up a little bit more. I always advise going skinny and then fattening it out if you need to, because you can't. It's harder to make it skinny after you've made it too fat.
Like trying to put on those pair of jeans that fit you better last year than they did this year.
Yeah. Need a time machine for the jeans. Funny because it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And just try to wrap the little feet around the branch if you can. And I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to that mix, a little bit more burnt umber, and use this grayed kind of brownish color to give a little bit of fur on the top of the leg. Just little flicks of the brush. hear. I wonder if the crows, if they can hear the crows.
Right, well, we've had people are chatting about crows, so maybe they're sensing that they're being talked about.
Maybe, man, they're loud.
Ugh. Got it. Go find your friends. They're not here.
We have New York crows, apparently.
It worked. Oh, there he's talking back to me.
And now you can go in with some olive or sap green, whichever green you decided to use. I usually like sap, but I have fallen in love with the sommelier olive green because it's so fresh.
Are you gonna try and come in the house or what?
I don't know.
It's getting closer. And people can hear him in the chat.
That's funny. They have got something to say today.
Get out of here.
Man, they both destroyed our back lawn. Luckily we planted more grass and it grew. I wasn't sure it was going to. They just were tearing up everybody's lawns this year.
They didn't get ours this year. No.
Between our neighbors and ours, they were awful. We must have had Japanese beetles
probably
or something. And I'm just going to do the same thing with my quinacridone rose. I wouldn't bother going in any of the buds that are still wet because it's just going to blur out. Just add a few accent lines on some of the ones that are dry. Now, if you didn't have watercolor pencils, there's not a reason in the world you can't just draw this with a pencil and go in, or even sketch it with a small brush and paint. So I just think with the watercolor pencil, it solves a couple problems. Some people complain about having lines, the pencil lines when they're done. They don't like to see that. So that eliminates that problem. And it also gives you a little more freedom because you can dissolve it away. If you decide to change your mind, you don't like it that much, it's not as permanent as, as a pencil mark. Sometimes you can go in and erase your pencil marks after, so that's not that big of a deal. But it's just a different thing to try if you're, trying to get rid of those pencil marks or just want a different look. I think I'm going to go in with a little bit more of the yellow ochre with a bigger brush than we used before. Yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt umber, just toning down some of the feathers. And it's kind of like making a recipe. You might prefer something a little bit differently. You do it differently on your painting if you don't like it exactly the way I have it. The object of today's lesson is to loosen up.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Not crazy about the tail. I gotta tell you that. I wasn't crazy about the tail in my practice one. I'm not crazy about the tail in this one.
That's okay.
I want to make it kind of fuzzy in the distance.
R2 Pavola, have you ever done a full piece in watercolor pencils?
Yes, I have. I don't very often just because I like to work fast and I find it's a little bit slower, but yeah, yes, I have. If you are going to do full pieces in watercolor pencils, I would highly recommend choosing a pencil that is light fast, and that would be your Caran d'Ache or your Albright Druer watercolor pencils, just because, like, if I'm using watercolor pencils and then I'm going over it with regular watercolors, I'm getting a lot of protection from those watercolors I'm going over. I'm not relying solely on the pencil, but if you are just using the watercolor pencil, then you have a little bit of light fast issue. And I kind of like how that spread out into the background, so I'm leaving it. If that happened to you and you didn't want to keep it, you just press it really quickly straight down with a paper towel and you can eliminate that bleed, but I really like the way that looks, so I'm leaving it on mine. And so at this point, I'm just kind of seeing what I want to add, any sort of details that I want. I did put a gel pen in the video description because that can be really handy to go in, like to add sparkles in the eye or add little feathers. You want to do that on dry paper though, so you would have to heat it or just be patient, let it dry. I think I want to do a little more detail on the stem, the branch there rather. I'm just grabbing some burnt umber and a little bit of phthalo blue. And I'm just going to kind of go in and add some, just kind of crispen up some parts of the branch. Because that would be pretty much in focus. If the bird's in focus, that branch is in the same depth of field.
Daria Shimon, what do you do if your watercolors don't blend?
Adding more water usually helps them to blend. It could be the paper. It's more unlikely the paper you're using than the watercolors, because the paper has sizing on it, and basically what that is, it's kind of like a glue that they put on the paper, and that acts as a barrier so that the paint does not absorb. The paint stays on top. And the more sizing that your paper has inside of it and on top of it, the more your paper is going to stay on the top of the surface and move around together. The less sizing it has, the more it's like painting on a piece of fabric, and the dye soaks in like you're dyeing fabric. So if your paint's behaving like that, it's probably your paper and not the paint. So try a paper that has more sizing, such as Strathmore Wind Power is very affordable, and it's highly sized. It's a recycled paper, so it has a sizing in it from previous papers that it was made from, plus it has the sizing that the manufacturer added to it. So it just gives you a nice surface that is not that absorbent, so your paints will want to blend rather than soak in. So there's only so many variables. I mean, your paint is one, your paper is one, how much water you add is the other. So you just got to work within those 3 variables to figure out where you're having your issues. I think that's why I like watercolor. It's really quite simple when you think about it. All right, I am going to give this a final dry and then maybe go in with a gel pen. So if you have any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and Sarah will ask me while I am drying.
R2 Pavola, do you ever use colored pencils on top of your watercolor pieces?
Oh, quite frequently. Last week's live stream with that frosty glass, we did that with color pencil. Color pencil on top of watercolor is fantastic. Color pencil really loves watercolor paper. And when you have a base color underneath it, it really gives you the best properties of both mediums. So absolutely give it a try. Color pencils are also more opaque than watercolor pencils. So if you've lost a light area or you need a little bit of a translucent glaze, you can really achieve that well with colored pencils. So if you've never tried it before, find a painting that maybe you weren't so happy with and go over it with a colored pencil. I think you'll really enjoy the versatility it gives you.
And Michael Ann, I just filled my first palette a few days ago. I noticed they're already cracking. How can I fix this?
Add a drop of glycerin if you have it. If you don't have glycerin, add a drop of honey to your paint. Some paints do not have that much glycerin in it or humectant in it, and that's what keeps the water in your paint, and it does need some. So that will keep it from cracking and then falling out and then having you waste that paint. I know some student grades, like the Marie's paint especially, will crack if you just squeeze it out on the palette and leave it. So that will help you save your paint. It will also make your paint easier to re-wet when you do want to go use it. Okay, so now I'm just going to tip this up and have a peek at it. I wish I did more credit card scraping now because I really love how it looks there in the face. I'm going to grab a white gel pen because I think it will enhance it a little bit. Up to you whether you want to do that or not. On the feet, I think it really needs that to kind of bring it out of the off the branch. Give a little highlight on the top. Oh, and it's World Watercolor Month. If any of you don't know what that's all about, it's there's a World Watercolor group started by Doodle Wash on Facebook and also the Doodle Wash website, and people paint every day in July in celebration of World Watercolor Month, and there are prompts. Angela Fair came out with this month's prompts, and they're really awesome, and you can find out more on that Facebook page. I wish I had more time to do all the little prompts, but it's always nice to see what other people are doing too.
R2 Pavola, have you tried Fabriano Artistico? And if you have, what are your thoughts on it?
It's good. I do have it. If you've ever used the Fabriano Uno, which is what I think they rebranded the Uno to be the Artistico, it's a absorbent paper. It's more absorbent than Arches. It uses a vegan sizing, a synthetic sizing, so it's not gelatin. Even though I'm a vegetarian, I prefer gelatin sizing my paper just because it just works better with the techniques I like to do. But if that's a concern, they use a synthetic sizing. It's good. It's not as slippery as Arches, so your paint is going to absorb more. That's the big difference. But that's a very good paper. I use that. I use Arches. I recommend it. I think it's a good idea to try a sheet of a few different papers before you go and invest in like a whole ream of anything. And then you get to a point where you can really just paint on anything. You just kind of adapt to the features that the paper has. I know if I'm painting on Artistico, I'm going to do different techniques than if I'm painting on Arches or the Langton Prestige, just because I know my paint's going to act differently. And I'm going to pull a few little feathers off the edge. I'm just moving my hand so you guys can see. And maybe a few over here. I think that pretty much does it. You guys can do some more splashing if you want to. It's completely up to you. I think I'm going to leave this as is right now. I can always come back and add more if I decide to. Just make sure if you are going in detail, make sure if you tend to rest your hand on your paper that it's dry so you don't end up smearing paper or getting paint all over yourself. If you have any questions afterwards or you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I will check back in later and answer any questions that got left later on. I thank everyone for their patience with our technical difficulties today, and I will edit out that mess before the before I publish the replay. So you can kind of sit tight for that. And thank you so much for watching. Do we have any other questions before we go, Sarah?
Grace Glosser, have you tried the gold Uniball pens?
No, I haven't. So I can't comment on those. I pretty much, if I'm for watercolor, I pretty much just use white and black. I use the microns for black usually. But no, she is up or she's.
I don't know. She didn't say. She was just asking.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that does it.
I think that does it.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, happy crafting.